extreme youth movement. What is your emotion at the end of the season after after everything is played out?
A couple things. Mixed, obviously, even though you're in the beginning stages of a rebuilding process, you always have to deal with the postmortems of not getting in the NBA playoffs, and that's where we're at, and we have to own it. Now, I do think, with that said, the youth of our roster turnover, I think everybody understands where we sit today, and we just visited with the players, and we really had 3 or 4 seasons within a season, and that's typical. Many times in the NBA, it's in my opinion, a series of short stories on how your team changes due to injury and play and trades. And this was, a series of short stories, in my opinion, that were extreme youth and what we did with the team. A preseason that got started off really well. We were organized well, and then we took a couple body blows during the early portion of the season, just due to the fact that we weren't able to have practices. The group was new to each other. The group was extremely young. And then after Christmas, we started showing signs of a lot of hard work over a period of time where, as Quin just talked to the team, we weren't seeing results maybe from a win-loss record standpoint. And so that turned, and we became more competitive after Christmas and into January, and then obviously after the All-Star break and trade deadline, the nature of our group and how we defended changed, and our hopes are real simply that that's something that we can build on.
Coach Snyder, how would you define the successes that you had this season and just overall?
Well, I think, first of all, Dennis, I think, did a very, very good job of capturing my feelings as well regarding kind of the process of improvement that we went through the season and the volatility that, by definition, is what an NBA season is about. I think the thing that's most encouraging to me is the perseverance that our team found throughout that process. Their ability to stay committed to a process that, at any given point was not giving them the feedback that ultimately you want. I think that the success of the group, as reflected by the wins, the loss, the record, the playoffs, is going to continue to be volatile. Obviously our expectations are high, but there's also a realism that we know is always present. But through that, it's going to require our guys and Dennis and myself to continue to persevere. And I think with that attitude that, we'll be able to stay committed to a process, and hopefully over time we'll continue to see results.
Dennis, you've said, a free agent, the right free agent saying, yeah, certain things would speed up your timeline. Has this season and the results you've seen, has that maybe altered your timeline as well?
Yeah, so I want to be very transparent with that, and I got asked that question last night by Bowler and Matt, and it's the most obvious question that's out there, and the only way to address it is just head on. We're actively discussing that, and the coaches have been so busy developing the players, we really haven't got as deep as I wanted to get, frankly, at this point of the season. But we will. Management, scouts, I've encouraged our guys to argue, and as you guys would imagine, we'll put every scenario up on the board, and I think beyond timelines, we got to get back to what's fundamental for the Utah Jazz. And if it's using all of our money that we've saved over the seasons for one guy, then so be it. But it has to be the right player the right mindset that fits the group. And so there's many discussions to be had, but we don't take lightly the character of the group that we have right now. The chemistry is really unique. It's collegiate in many ways, and it's pure. And so we hold that in high trust. So there's going to be a lot of difficult decisions. Look, other than Alec Burks this year, we didn't experience many injuries and lost games. And you guys have probably seen the analytical analysis relative to that. And that's a credit to our medical services group. It's a credit to Gary Briggs, who's soon to retire. And so we have to make that process make sense as well. And then I think we'll come up with something that is sound. And if sound means be bold, then we'll do that. The Miller family's fully committed to that. If it's stay extremely young because we like the group, and that in our opinion is the best alternative, we'll go there, or really Aaron, anywhere in between. But the good news is, the great news is I still think the best arc of improvement is really our internal improvement, and it's why we hired Quin. He's very special. He and his staff are very special with player development. I think all of us have seen that. Adding Alec back to the group, and then we'll decide. We'll decide is selecting a late lottery pick the right thing to do, or do we push that pick out? Do we parlay it to a vet? And then, but the neat thing is we have a full set of alternatives in front of us, and that's a credit to the Miller family, to Kevin O'Connor, Walt Perrin, Bob Hyde, Randy Rigby, guys that really made many set of long-term decisions and delayed gratification, and now we're starting to see the fruit of that.
Quin, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth out of Rudy Gobert in such a short period of time. What are you going to ask him to work on most this summer? Where can he go from here, basically?
Well, I think in many respects, first of all, it's what Dennis said, and Rudy and being selected by our group, and the promise and the potential that he had on the very front end. It's exciting to me to have the opportunity to, after the fact, join an organization and a team that has someone like Rudy, and I think we have a lot of players like Rudy that have such a quote-unquote upside. There's a lot of players that we talk about having potential and upside and those things, and I think maybe the most unique thing about Rudy is his competitive desire to get better. It's our job to channel that. You'd like to think that it'll permeate a lot of things, but I think right now for Rudy, that being channeled in a few more specific areas is the way for him to make the quickest improvement. And over time, I think you'll see the other things. As an example, last year, free throws were a huge part, something he committed to, and we saw the results of that, where even that being a subtle thing, it makes him even more confident around the basket, because when he does get fouled, he wants to get fouled, he gets to the line, and good things happen. The other thing I think we saw was his physical development. And as Dennis said, with our medical staff, our strength and conditioning staff, they've been terrific with him. I think I mentioned at some point I don't know if it was the first day or one of the first days I was here, I was walking across the gym, and there comes Rudy. And he's really diligent and committed in the weight room. And Mark and Ike are a big part of that he's committed to that path. I think more specifically on the skill front, Rudy's skilled. I think you see that manifest itself right now primarily in his passing. He's erratic at times, which I'm okay with, under certain parameters, because I think there are plays that you want your players to make that, even though they're not successful in the short term, they'll eventually produce growth. So we can focus a lot on his offense. His defense seems and is so impactful. But I think additionally, he can continue to have the impact that he has around the rim in different facets of our defense, particularly as a leader. I liken it a little bit to a middle linebacker that's got the court in front of him, and the more communicative he can be, I think the better that he'll become and will become. And that said, back to the offensive end, I think it's a matter of time before he's able to, continue to develop, whether it be finishing around the rim or, making a mid-range jump shot, which hopefully will continue to. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but I know it's something that we want and will encourage, and that effort hopefully will produce results for him there.
You talked about chemistry and then also talking about Alec. And as you kind of increase talent and increase, that level on the team, how do you balance it? And maybe this is for both of you. How do you balance keeping the chemistry versus with trying to still develop your players such as Alec and Rodney with as well, especially as Rodney's been played down the stretch? How do you do
I'll
that?
handle the first part, and then if Quin wants to add something. Frankly, chemistry is fragile, and we all know it when we see it, and we can feel it, and then we obviously know what the opposite of that looks like as well. And so with teams, the equilibrium and the balance of having good chemistry is frankly very fragile. And luckily, if you put enough good people in the room together and give them a common cause and talk to them about how they can participate in that in a tangible way, usually good things happen. And so I think we'll get back to our core beliefs of what a team should look like, and that's high-minded around here, as everyone knows. John and Carl and Coach Sloan, and the history of the Jazz is one that the fans expect team play on both ends of the court. And while we're probably not passing the ball like John did in the heydays, I do think the fans quickly gravitated towards our defensive chemistry, and then it's our job to pick up those other areas. And so when you enter potentially new people into the equation, you have to talk that out. You have to talk that out with the group that you have and how it fits, and those conversations are delicate, but you have to be completely honest as well. So we'll discuss it, and it will be a topic that we'll continually talk about on a daily basis.
I guess that just from a developmental standpoint, I think that the players' progress and development being aligned with the things that the team needs, wherever that overlap occurs, I think that accelerates chemistry. When that doesn't occur, which is a lot, we get back to the character of the players and the tradition, and the people that have come before that have established that culture by being willing to put the group first and finding their way within that. And ultimately, I think we're rewarded for that.
Dennis, what's your view of the state of the point guard position and the development of those guys?
Yeah, so clearly just from a baseline level of production that it has to improve, but there's no reason why it can't improve with three young players that we have. Two are 22 and one's 19, and they're all good kids and very good workers. And so, we'll have to evaluate each player. That's what this day's a big part of that is just to sit down and get schedules and talk about development. And the other thing I would say too is currently as the team's constituted, our wings have a great deal. We're fortunate to have good wings that have a great deal of ball handling responsibility. So as much as maybe we want it to look like John in the past and have that one player that dominates the ball, and I say dominates the ball in a good way. The way the league's moving, the way our particular team has evolved with procurement is we have some excellent wings that handle and need the ball, to be frank. We're going to bring Alec back Gordon's one of our better playmakers and decision makers. Rodney Hood's shown some ability to have the ball. Joe Ingles' probably best quality is as a ball mover, and so that can mean different things for Trey and Dante and Bryce, and improving their open shooting, for example, being great team defenders, quickly getting us into our offense. So, and all the while, as their skill set improves, as their experience becomes deeper, then I think they can handle a larger share of the possessions. The one thing that I'd say, relative to Dante, for example, is when you look at his individual stats, they're humble, as you would suspect as a 19-year-old, but the impact on the team was huge. And it was because he didn't force himself on the game. And, there's no stat for that to say, hey, I'm going to avoid trouble. And the other thing is his length, and his intelligence, his character allowed him to become a plus defender at 19 years old in the league. And it's something that Quin and I, frankly, didn't expect. So with Trey, his pull-up shooting, handling late clock possessions, Bryce has shown some speed that's increased our pace. So I think we have some raw material to work with. And it's very young, and we have to own that. That's how we set up the team. But there's no reason why all three of those guys can't improve.
Okay, this is for both of you, actually. Is it harder to improve at the same rate you've been progressing at as you get better? And then as those expectations rise, how do you keep the guys motivated? Is there any tendency to be satisfied with the progress already in hand?
Simply, the first answer, I'd say yes. It is harder, depending on some level how we define that. If it's wins or losses, you reach a point where, it just gets harder. And that progress that you make, although it could continue at a similar rate, it may not reflect the bottom line. That said, at some point there's a little bit of a breakthrough point, and we hit one of those, I think, after All-Star break, where the grind started to visibly pay off, and we'll continue to do that. And it's just hard to say where it ends up, but it's like your golf game, and the lower you get in your handicap, the harder it is. And I think it's similar but it requires the same effort or more. And I do think oftentimes that energy and effort required to do that is maybe lost on players at the beginning, but it quickly surfaces. And I don't think our players are satisfied in any way, but that may not always equate specifically to, an immediate jump. It's the same thing and we'll keep talking about it. I think that's one of the most important things for us to be realistic about our group's improvement, and for them to be the same, and for us to echo that.
Guys, we only have time for a couple more questions. Mike, third row back on that.
Yeah, Dennis, this is a question, a financial question, just as far as, you talk about the chemistry and the young team you have. I wondered are you going to be required to bring in a veteran player that for money purposes, or can you get by with what you have now, or can you readjust contracts?
Yeah, great question. We'll have those discussions with the Miller family and Steve Starks, and so we feel no pressure whatsoever to. I think teams can get in trouble when they feel pressure to spend dollars because you have them. I think it always gets back to the fundamental question: are you spending wisely? And look, we're not going to make a great decision on every selection, whether it be free agency, trade, or the draft. But hopefully through contract structures, through very good intel and scouting, if you do make mistakes, you can mitigate those mistakes, quickly admit those mistakes, and then move on. So again, I think good decisions or born out of a good set of options. And through a lot of people's efforts, we have a good set of options as we sit here today, and we're very confident that we'll be able to move the group forward with the resources that we have in hand. But back to the original point on the question, do we feel obligated that we have to do it? Absolutely not. We could exist underneath the salary cap again today or going into next season. It's something when I visited with Quin that I really appreciated during the interview process. I said there's a good chance we're going to draft a 19-year-old. There's a very good chance that we'll be underneath the salary cap. There's an excellent chance the end of your roster will be very fluid and we'll rotate guys through. And all of that had to do with strategy. It had nothing to do with the payroll and being cheap. It had to be with being consistent within our rebuild. And I think we have been that so far. So if that's working, why would you arbitrarily change the path unless it's just fundamentally sound that spending every dollar available to us equates to wins and allows us to progress as a team.
Dennis, if you would, could you critique the job you feel like Quin did as a first-year head coach in this league? I know that I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Can I step out?
Yeah. Yes. And also, Coach Snyder, I wondered if you could just summarize.
We need to critique Dennis.
What it's been. Yeah, you could do that. It'd be good. What it was like as a first-year coach.
We do that all the time
every day.
In private moments.
Just if Coach Snyder, if you could also summarize what it's like, maybe some things you learned that you weren't maybe aware of as a first-year head coach.
Yeah, so I think, again, it doesn't, guys, if I'm not willing to comment, during certain periods that are rougher and clearly we sit here today in a better position than where we started, I'm not going to openly talk about every point, but it's safe to say it's not about me, it's not about Quin, it's not about Gordon and Derek, it's about the group. And the group is moving in the right direction, and I do appreciate how hard the coaches have worked at their job. I appreciate the mindset that we had. Look, it's tough when you come in and the average age of your starter is younger than the BYU starters as we know. It's in a man's league. That's daunting. And I asked a few simple things from our coaches that they work hard, that the next day they were able to shake off a loss and be resilient and be energetic with a group. Last night was tough to sit through, right? Even though that we had to strategically sit some players. And Quin came back at halftime, and there was messages around teaching and how to handle the second half. So it goes without saying, we're thrilled with him and the hire.
Guys, we're gonna have to wrap it up. We'll have Gordon in here in just a minute. So I want to thank them for their time and
too much to communicate.
Thank you for coming out today. We appreciate it.